Hello, everyone. For everyone joining us, we're just going to give it about 30 more seconds just to make sure anyone who's kind of like in between the wait room and the webinar can make their way in, and then we'll get started. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's GRADnavigate session on demystifying comprehensive and qualifying exams. Um, Before we get started into two other things, I would like to mention just a few housekeeping things. First of all, the GRADnavigate session will be recorded and it will be posted on our website. So if there's at any point where you're thinking, like what did Ashley say about that one comprehensive exam tip? No worries, it will be recorded so you can go back and see exactly what I said about it. And I can also make the slides available to you as well. You will also find, most likely it will be at the bottom of your screen, an option for closed captioning. If that's something you would like to enable, it will probably say CC. And you will also have a Q&A function available to you as well, probably again at the bottom of your screen. At any point throughout this session, you could pop up any questions that come to mind, and then we'll address as many as possible at the end of the presentation. So you don't have to hold on to your questions till the end. You can put them on all throughout as I'm speaking, and then I'll go back and look at them later on. So with that, before we get started further, I'd like to have a territorial acknowledgement. So the University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work toward reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is coordinated within the Office of Indigenous Relations. I'd also like to share a personal acknowledgement from myself. As someone whose ancestors settled in the territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, Wensio, and Mississauga peoples, I seek to learn more about the injustices Indigenous peoples face, as well as the call to actions advocated for by attending workshops, reading, and conversing with the people around me. I recognize acknowledgements like this are only one step toward reconciliation, and there is still a lot of work to be done across Canada related to the inequities, barriers, and damage colonization has caused. So I highly recommend checking out the Office of Indigenous Relations on campus. They have fantastic resources, information packages, trainings, workshops, and events that you can attend to learn more as well. So I am Ashley Ryan. I am the Graduate and Postdoctoral Programming Specialist over at Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs. I'm so happy to see you all here today wanting to learn about the exciting world of comprehensive and qualifying exams. So some little bit of context about me. The doctor is there because I did finish my PhD in 2023. So that means I did go through the comprehensive exam process. I did my PhD at the University of Waterloo. So in my program in sociology, it actually was required that I do 2 comprehensive exams. So I had to go through this kind of process 2 different times. So I'm excited to be here to kind of share some tips and advice for those who maybe have not experienced that milestone quite yet, as many of you, I imagine, are in that kind of scenario. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to do kind of a brief talk about what exactly are comprehensive and qualifying exams. What's the difference between them? How do I go about preparing for this exam? What are some effective strategies for maybe reading the literature or taking notes? How does the exam kind of go? Like what do I do? What do I expect in terms of the actual exam, in terms of maybe your committee? As well as some additional resources that we would like to share that are going to really be a benefit to you as you kind of go through this process in addition to other milestones that are coming up your way. So I like to share this kind of little cartoon. It's kind of people wandering around and they're all thinking the same thing. And they're thinking, all these people really seem to have it together, and I still have no idea what's going on. And I want to say, 63 people registered to attend this session. You are not the only person who wants to learn more about different processes like comp exams. Everyone's kind of in a similar predicament, right? The important thing is that you're here to learn and figure out what the process looks like and some strategies involved. But I think it's important to emphasize that, especially with a PhD, the PhD kind of is this quite a strange kind of beast and kind of situation to go through, to be involved in as you are in your life and figuring out. It's not something that is super commonly experienced by the general public. And so it is completely normal to be kind of wandering through your PhD thinking that you don't have it together. And it's totally okay. Again, I want to emphasize the biggest thing is that you're willing and taking the time to do the learning to figure out what might be involved. All right, so what are comprehensive exams? Comprehensive exams and qualifying exams are basically written and/or oral examinations designed to assess whether a PhD student is qualified to progress into PhD candidacy. Now, I started the qualified to progress piece because, as you'll notice, it doesn't say to make sure that someone is smart enough to continue into the program or good enough to progress. No, it says qualified to progress, meaning that we basically want to make sure that you have acquired to date kind of the necessary skills in order to move forward to higher level programming in the program. So even at this point in time, for example, if you don't feel quite ready yet, that's okay. You are slowly kind of building those skills that will be making you qualified to progress. So basically what it is as well is an evaluation of specialized knowledge by a committee of expert scholars. So they're kind of trying to figure out if you have learned the necessary knowledge in your field to move to the next step. Typically, this is also why that you will have to pass the comprehensive exams in order to move on to working on your dissertation work. For sometimes, depending on your department and program, this kind of step will also be an assessment of your PhD thesis proposal or a paper that might be really tied to your thesis or dissertation work. Not for everyone, though. It kind of depends on the field, like I was saying. For example, in mine, both of my comprehensive exams were very general, different pieces of knowledge in my field, not necessarily specific to what I was going to be working on in my dissertation. And then typically when you're looking at timelines, you will be completing your comprehensive and qualifying exams within 7 terms of study. And being here today, I imagine some of you are probably within years 1 or 2 of your program, with maybe a few of you being in potentially years 3. But typically, they'll be completed in your first 2 years. All right, so what is the difference between a comprehensive and a qualifying exam? I would say, so typically in terms of what fields you're going to be looking at, which ones, it really depends on even different fields within arts, for example, have different qualifying or comprehensive exams. Typically, if you're looking at more like math and engineering, you may have hearing the qualifying exam piece come up a bit more compared to if your example in my situation in sociology, we are leaning towards maybe the comprehensive side. So basically, a qualifying exam is developed and administered for a cohort of students, compared to the comprehensive, where it's more based around the student. So, for example, with me, when I did my comprehensive exam specifically, the reading list, the committee, the questions, it was all specifically made for me as an individual student to do that test. Whereas a qualifying exam, it would be more for a larger group of students doing the same kind of testing procedure. And so again, I just want to mention, because I know I'm seeing some questions pop in the chat or in the Q&A. Yes, please continue to do that. I'm going to address as many questions at the end. So yeah, if a question pops up, pop it right into the Q&A. So again, kind of tied to what we were talking about a bit earlier of that factor of maybe some of you don't quite feel ready yet. And that's okay. Readiness isn't a fixed state. It's something you build step by step, day by day. The comprehensive exam isn't just a test of what you know, it's a testament to your growth, your resilience, and your ability to rise to a challenge. So I want you to remember this from today, in addition to some of the effective strategies, is not being ready yet is not a failure. It's a promise. So a promise that with effort, with focus, and believing in yourself, you will be ready. You've come this far, not by accident, but by intention. Trust that process, keep showing up, keep learning, and know that readiness is not a moment, it's a mindset. So if you are being in the situation where you're continuing to learn in your field and you're willing to do things like coming to this event today, you will be building towards those skills that will allow you to progress through this milestone in your program and with other pieces in your degree. So a little bit more about comprehensive and qualifying exams. So at the university level, we do have kind of standardized general guidelines for all PhD comprehensive examinations. Those can be found online. I will actually share the guidelines with you in the chat. I'm just going to stop sharing for 1 second to go get those. Basically, in the grad academic calendar, we actually have a bunch of information on what is required, the minimum requirements for a PhD at the university. And so part of that is kind of the qualifications of the comprehensive and qualifying exams. So I've shared that in the chat. All right. So in addition to the university guidelines that we have, we also have kind of, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes things will depend a little bit on your department and your faculty and your program. So check in with your faculty and department to kind of see if there are any additional requirements that are standardized for your program in relation to your comprehensive or qualifying exams. Typically, these details can also be found online, but if you can't find them and track them down anywhere, reach out to maybe your grad officer or grad coordinator, and your supervisor will be able to help with this as well. I would also recommend kind of finding and tracking these down as early as possible. So if your comp exam is next week, maybe now is not the best time to be just finding this information out. But if you are, then it is what it is. It's totally okay. You can learn as you are learning. But the earlier is the better, right? Because then you'll know kind of what to expect. You can talk to other peers in your department, maybe who have already gone through this milestone. You can have those conversations with your supervisor. So I always say to students, be prepared as early as possible. All right. So in terms of what this kind of exam might look like for you, it's going to be one of 3 formats typically. It will be either a written or an oral exam, or it will be kind of a hybrid of both of these components wrapped in. So if you are required to do a written format, which is purely written with no sort of conversation or like defense or anything like that, typically maybe you'll get to your department or your committee is going to be drafting some form of reading list for you. Again, if it's a qualifying exam, maybe more people than just you are going to be getting the same list. If it's a comp exam, it will be catered to you specifically. Sometimes you would be basically given a list of questions to respond to in a written submission. And this may also be a very time restrictive kind of format. So for example, in the Department of Sociology and Legal Studies, when I went to go do my comprehensive exams, I had two options. I could either choose a 6-hour sit-down exam, or I could choose a hybrid exam where I was given a list of questions and I had 1 week to write 40 pages to respond to those questions. And then 2 weeks later-ish, I had an oral defense of the answers I provided for my committee. For both of my comp exams, I personally chose to take the hybrid route, mostly because I wanted to get some more experience with the defending piece, because I knew that that would become more important later on in my program, especially because I had to defend my dissertation proposal as well as, of course, my dissertation. If you're given options, there are pros and cons, right? That are kind of just going to come down to preference. So for example, some benefits of a written format like this that might be, that 6-hour sit down, you can maybe potentially get it out of the way in one day, which can be nice, right? Whereas the hybrid version, maybe you're doing the writing for a week and then you have to do the defense, so it's a bit longer. But on the flip side of that, you kind of have more time to think about the questions. So it really kind of depends on what your field is and what you're thinking and what the options might be available to you. So outside the written one, we have that oral format, which sometimes you see popping up in like engineering, science, health, and math. And so typically what I've seen is what this might look like is a paper or proposed draft of your proposal submitted to the committee in advance, and then they will kind of create a series of questions about the viability of your proposal, if it can be done, if it's kind of what the scope is, as well as the depth and breadth of your knowledge in order to continue doing the work that you're proposing. And so in this case, if it is that and you get to submit a draft of your proposal, for example, then that will be directly tied to your PhD work as you move forward. But this is not always the case, right? Sometimes you may have to do a comprehensive exam or a qualifying exam that the responses will not be necessarily specifically tied to your dissertation. So again, this all really depends on your department, but these are the kind of different options that you might be seeing pop up for you. And again, I kind of talked a little bit about the hybrid format already. I'm seeing this a lot in like the arts and environment faculties. So like I already mentioned, you're typically given a time frame to do a written response, and then your committee will go and read it, and then you'll have to orally defend it to some extent or have some form of discussion that they're evaluating you on. And so, like I mentioned, I had 1 week to write 40 pages to respond to some questions I was given. And then about 2 weeks later, I had to orally defend it. So one thing I will say about kind of these exams and what to expect content-wise is that, again, it really depends on your field, but it's not always necessarily just going to be questions about what you are thinking about specifically researching for your dissertation work. For my personal experience, my committee saw that I had, I guess, done a lot of work in the peer influence and social learning and crime area. That's where my dissertation work was kind of in. And so 2 out of 3 of the main questions I got on my comprehensive exam was in a field called critical criminology, which was was information that I needed to know as someone moving forward in becoming an independent scholar and learning in the field of sociology, but it was not almost like pretty much not at all related to the dissertation work that I was doing. So I just want to prepare you for that in your comprehensive exams, it's not out of the norm to get questions that are in your field, that are not necessarily tied to your topic area that you are researching. So maybe you've done your written exam or your oral exam, or maybe that hybrid version that I mentioned, and you're kind of wondering, what are the outcomes that might come out of this exam? So on your first attempt at doing a comprehensive or qualifying exam, you will be given one of three outcomes from your committee. You will either have option one, which is passed, meaning you have successfully completed the exam, you have achieved that milestone, and you can move forward. You may receive a pass conditionally, which basically means that there may be some fairly minor requirements in order for you to achieve that pass, but you typically won't have to write the exam again, for example. So you've pretty much passed the exam, but there might be some little minor changes that are required from the committee. Similar to, with the outcomes with the dissertation defense, sometimes there are some changes. Or you might be given an option 3, which I would say is not super common, and that would be re-examination. And so basically in this component, your committee has determined that you might not be fully qualified yet to move forward, or the exam hasn't gone quite to the criteria that they were looking for. And so you may have to do the exam again. And so if you are in a situation where you are given a re-examination outcome while you are doing your comprehensive exam, you will be given a written communication identifying which areas of growth and reasoning are behind the decision that they are giving you as the committee to have to do the test again. So they will give you some sort of justification or reasoning or things to improve on for next time. So after, if you get that outcome, you will either be given, you'll be given a chance to write again. And on that chance, you will either be given a passed or exam unsuccessful on the second run of a test. Now, these kind of exams are determined, the outcome is determined as kind of a majority vote of your committee. So whatever the majority votes on your committee, that is the outcome that you're going to get. If there is ever a scenario where there is a tiebreaker and your committee is very specific, like you have 4 members on your committee and 2 are giving you like a pass conditionally and 2 are voting for re-examination, for example, and they are sticking to those votes, then your Associate Dean of Graduate Studies in your faculty will be the person responsible for deciding on the tiebreaker. So again, what are some kind of things that they're looking for or purposes of an examination that are kind of tied to what we were talking about earlier? Well, the reason that we kind of do these exams with PhD students is to, one, to make sure that students have the appropriate academic background and kind of the foundation and the breadth of knowledge in your field in order to be successful in your PhD program down the line. And, especially since after you get past the comprehensive exam stage, it typically is fairly independent work, right? You are becoming that independent scholar, even though you do have your supervisor there to guide you. You're doing a lot of work in the field and working with the literature. You're going to conferences even more as an independent nature as you were before, perhaps. And so it's kind of trying to figure out to make sure that you have that background knowledge and the skills to move to that stage. Again, related to conferences or publishing and things like that, seeing to make sure you have the capacity to engage in the scholarly communications, and that you've developed a novel research topic for some fields. Like I was mentioning, some comprehensive exams will not focus on this purpose, but in some fields where they're asking you to maybe submit your proposal as your comprehensive exam, then they may be kind of evaluating if the topic is strong enough and novel enough for you to move forward to work on it at the dissertation level. All right, so Preparing for your exam. What are some things that might be helpful for you to do? The one thing that I kind of mentioned at the beginning, early planning. So plan as early as possible, get the information, review your department's guidelines and timelines carefully and early. Talk to your supervisor about what to expect. Start earlier in terms of forming your examining committee. Even figure out how that's kind of done, which will be the next slide as well. It's important to set clear timelines and communicate them early with your supervisor and committee so that everyone's kind of on the same page and know kind of what's going to be happening and what the expectations are. And if you would like to access accommodations, go as early as possible through accessibility services to get those arranged. So a quick note about accessibility services is that they can offer accommodations and arrange for accommodations for all graduate milestones. So they're not there just on campus, just for undergraduate students and just for things like your typical like sit down for an hour and a half test. They can also arrange for accommodations for things like defenses or things like your comprehensive exams. So I highly recommend checking them out and seeing what can be done if you're in a situation that you may need to access them. We do also have a GRADnavigate session coming up in November about accessing accessibility services, and I'll share the link further on as well. So if that's something of interest, highly recommend coming to that event as well. All right, so your examining committee, what will this look like? It will typically look like 3 to 5 individuals. Both of my comprehensive exams just had 3 people on them. So at least 2 of your examining members must hold regular faculty appointments at the University of Waterloo, meaning that technically you can have a committee member who is not at the University of Waterloo. And at least 1 of your committee members must be tenured or tenure track in your specific department or school. There may be some additional criteria for your committee in terms of guidelines. So I highly recommend, again, have a chat with your department, graduate officer or grad coordinator and your supervisor about if there's any specific requirements around the committee. The committees will also need to be approved by your Associate Dean of Graduate Studies for your faculty. And so as you're starting to see, committee memberships are not typically something that you're going to be putting together like a week before your comprehensive exam. Typically, you're going to be putting these together like weeks, sometimes even months before you start rolling down and writing out responses. So again, work with your supervisor early to organize your exam committee. Depending on your field, you're going to play a bit more of a role in who is going on your committee compared to other departments. So again, speak with your department supervisor to see what the specific restrictions might be. So if you are in a situation where you have a large role or more of a role in selecting your committee members, here's some things to consider. So first, consider speaking with other students to get their assessment of potential committee members. So there's nothing stopping you from going. You can go and chat with other students in your department who may have had faculty members sit on their committee to see kind of how their defenses went, to see how their personality or type of questioning or shared interests might be aligned with yours. And if you also have additional ideas or comments about the selection of a committee, I am definitely happy to hear those. Put those in the chat right now. We can discuss a couple. It's okay if you don't have any as well. But I would definitely say as you're popping into the chat, this is something I definitely did. So I definitely chatted with other students when I was doing the comprehensive exam process. I chatted with other students to see how their comprehensive exams went with faculty members that I may be interested in working with on the committee. I kind of looked into different potential committee members' work online, so kind of get a sense of the work that they're doing and the methodologies that they use to see how that would be aligned with kind of the work that I was doing. In some of my members, I kind of based it a little bit off of experiences that I had with them, maybe as a someone who taught me in undergrad, because I personally did all my degrees at the University of Waterloo. So I think there was one or two occasions in my graduate career where a faculty member that was on a committee had potentially taught me a course in undergrad. So I had a little bit of background knowledge of how they kind of interacted with students and how they questioned and came up with questions and things like that. So those are some tips. I'm not seeing any other tips in the chat, so that's okay. If you have any, feel free to pop it in and we can discuss it later as well. All right. So I know I'm emphasizing a lot about the communication piece and asking for clarification already, and I'm going to emphasize it again here. So for a little bit of background, additionally about me, is that, over the years, I've had a lot of discussions with students in terms of, their experiences with committees and their supervisors during my time working at the Graduate Student Association and now still at my time working at the Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs. And, I would say 8 to 9 times out of 10, when issues come up, they're tied to a lack of communication or miscommunication. So this is why I'm saying that, it's really important to have those open communication, open discussions, so make sure everyone's on the same page. So if you have questions about your timeline for your comprehensive exams or the requirements or the expectations, start having those conversations, ask those questions. People are here to help you. You can also come chat with me, send me an email at gradexperience@uwarley.ca, and I could try to find you some answers as well if you're not sure where to start. Another thing that might be helpful for you, ask a friend. It could be a friend in your department who is doing the same program as you, maybe another grad student from a different department, maybe even someone who is completely not in academia. Kind of explain the exam process to them and see if they have any questions that maybe you haven't thought about. So, having that different perspective might come up at different kind of gaps in understanding about the exam process that you might go, maybe I should actually ask for some more clarification about this one piece of the exam process. You can also obtain and request past exam examples and past reading lists to check out to see kind of what they might look like, to kind of get an idea of what to expect. And you can get those from your supervisor might have them, maybe members of your committee, maybe other faculty members that you're working with. The department might have them on hold somewhere as well. So reach out, do some exploring. But yeah, you can always reach out to your graduate officer or grad coordinator or your supervisor in your department to kind of get these answers. Okay, so arranging accommodations, I have already talked a little bit about this as well, but just to emphasize again, I would say if you are someone who may need to access accommodations, try to be as proactive about this as possible and start the process now of going to accessibility services and having a chat with them to see what might be possible. So I've linked the website there and I'll link it again later on. But if you just put into Google accessibility services, UWarLoo, and you'll be able to go to their page. They have kind of a step-by-step on how to access their services. And again, our next session through GRADnavigate will be about accessing accessibility services. So please feel free to come to that event and learn more as well. And there's a lot of different things that can happen with accessibility services. So they can kind of make arrangements in terms of the format of your exam, different steps that are required, the timelines that are required for you in your degree. So there are different things that might be an option. All right. So going into effective strategies. So in terms of, studying for your comprehensive or qualifying exam and making that timeline piece and figuring out how you handle maybe all the literature that's going to come your way, and piecing and blocking that up. Here are some tips and tricks for handling that. So one, establishing a timeline. So create a personalized timeline for the work that you need to do, not your friend, not this other person in a different department, what you need to specifically do in order to prepare for the comprehensive or qualifying exam that you will have to take on. So develop a clear study timeline. Maybe perhaps you get that reading list given to you, and maybe you set blocks. You go, I will tackle like this first section of readings by November 12th, and then I'll tackle these next sections by December 7th. So blocking them out is a strategy, so you're not necessarily like overwhelmed just taking on the whole reading list just randomly. That's a tip I have anyways. That's kind of the method that I kind of chose. You want to start early and plan for consistent incremental progress. So especially if there is some prep work or skill development and knowledge to be obtained before you start the official exam process, block out some time for that as well. So there will be kind of a timeline for when you're actively working on and doing your exam process, but there might also be that separate timeline leading up to your defense as well, or sorry, your comprehensive exam. In terms of notes, I do have a few examples to show you of things that may be helpful, because I know it can be tricky, or I thought it was tricky when I was starting the exam process for both of my comps, especially my comprehensive exam number 1, was trying to figure out like what is the ideal way of structuring my notes and tackling this reading list, and questions as well, so that I can as effectively find responses and answers later in the literature to help me answer questions. So here are some examples that I have spotted online that might be helpful for you in terms of organizing your literature, for example. So one example is a literature review matrix. So some of you may have come across this already. This is kind of a simplified version of one. So basically it's a big like grid system. This one in particular from the University of Tasmania, they've broken it down by themes. So, in one column they have different themes that they're looking at in their literature. And then to the right in each column, they have a different article that they're reviewing with important notes broken up under each theme. And so basically it's a chart that organizes key information from research sources to help analyze and compare them as you're going through this process. So your matrix might not look like this, right? Your matrix might have, and I would encourage potentially, some more information. Perhaps you actually flip the columns and rows around. Maybe you have a section for authors, year, the methodology used, and then you have a row for each source. And then maybe you have sections for, notes on gaps or things that contradict each other in the literature or things that are highly related in the literature. So there are tons of different ways to do a literature review matrix. So whatever information you feel that you're going to need for your exam and future work, you could make something like this. Another technique that was suggested to me that I saw online was the SQ3R strategy. So basically the SQ3R method or strategy, it's a reading comprehension technique with 5 steps. So there's an S, a Q, and 3 Rs. So typically, if you have arrived, you have an article in your hand, let's say, or a book chapter or a book. The first stage is the first S, or the only S, which is survey. So basically what is recommended in the S, or the survey initial part of looking at this article or your book, is to do an initial skim. So in this survey portion, we're not like reading in depth, we're not reading all the paragraphs. What we're doing is just an initial skim of the headings to kind of get a general bird's eye view of what is this article talking about. So the headlines will kind of hopefully give you a good idea of like, okay, what is going to be addressed here? Does this relate to my work? What's going to be covered? What's not going to be covered? You'll typically get a good idea doing that initial survey start. Once you've done that, you're going to kind of move into the Q, which is the question, which basically means that you create questions about the text you are about to read. So again, you haven't fully read it yet. You've only kind of skimmed it for those initial headlines. So you make those questions related to your work. Like, how does this relate to my work? What gaps might be missing? Does this relate to other articles that I've already read? So make a batch of questions that you are now going to address as you go through the article or your book. So moving on to the read phase, or the first R, and this is where your questions that you've developed under the Q are going to guide your reading as you go through. So in this R or read, you kind of, now you've gone to the top of the article or book and you do a full read through. Focusing on letting the questions that you are thinking in your head and you've written down guide your focus as important information pieces to pull out as you're going. So you've surveyed it, you've questioned it, you've done the full read through with the questions guiding you in that read through. And now we're going to move to the second R, which is recite. So under this recite, you're going to go back and you are going to look at the questions that you initially came up with under the Q phase, and you're going to answer those questions. So since those questions were guiding you through the article or your book, you will hopefully, by the end of reading, you have an idea of how to answer those questions. Maybe those questions, some of them maybe didn't get answered in your article, and that's important to note down as well. So again, recite, figure out what the answers to your questions are that you came up with, and then that will take you to the last R, which is review. So you're going to review the main ideas and the answers to the questions that you had and how it related to your work, and review, and you can talk out loud, kind of get it repetitive so it gets into your head. And then you can do this kind of same process with other articles you might be coming across. So this technique is more so a way of reading in notes that you may even combine with a different technique. Maybe you combine this reading comprehension technique, and maybe you make a matrix with some additional information that you find out. Whatever works for you. Now I wanted to show you what I did for my comprehensive exams. So I went into my crazy long document of comprehensive exam notes and pulled this out for you. It's a screenshot right from my exam notes. How I went about doing it was I kept it all in one Word document, and I blocked out sections that kind of were labeled depending on the reading list section. So into my reading list, I had like 4 sections, for example, and then like maybe like 10 books or articles under each section. And so this section was cut off a little bit at the top, potentially, but it was the research, just general research design section that I had. And so this would be the first article that I read or took notes on under that section. And so these are kind of the pieces that I took out from everything that I was reading. So this one article or book that I was reading, I kept note of the title of the work. I proactively did the citation for this work. And the reason that I highly recommend doing this is that if you have a take-home examination, which many exams are now, because like I mentioned, I had that 1 week to kind of come up with my responses to submit. While I was going through, I was already proactively checking and making sure that the sources were accurate. And so when I went to go make my reference page for one of my responses, I could just go back to my notes and copy and paste the citation that I had already created and checked. So it was really quick to just do it compared to taking time out of the precious tight timeline I had for the questions on reference pages. So it was already created. I had a section on key relevancy, so kind of like the key things that were talked about. So for example, in this article, it talked about survey errors and quantitative research design in general. I also kept track of if it happened to reference or talk about other readings that were on my list. So that later, when I was doing my write-up and my responses, that I could compare or talk about both citations and both works synchronously, I guess, together if they related. So it's easier to spot it that way. I put in the abstract in case I wanted to complete like bird's eye view of my notes. And then I got into the notes section where I broke it down by header or chapter, kind of depended on the thing that I was reading. So as you see here, I have introduction, population and samples. So those are they were probably, like I mentioned, either headers or chapters or something like that. I can't remember what exactly this piece was. Another thing I want to highly recommend here, and you'll see them popping up under my notes section, keep track of the page numbers so that when you go back to write up your responses, you can properly in text cite all of the work that you are talking about. You don't want to be spending and wasting time going back and figuring out, like what page did I see this again? Or like who quoted what? This way you can go back to your notes, you can CTRL-F, find the information that's required for your response, see exactly what you took notes on, the page number's right there already, the citation's there already. All you have to do is kind of make the in-text and plop it into your work. And it's easier, it's already done in advance. All right. So again, if you have any questions about that, pop it in the Q&A and I will address as many as possible at the end. So some of you might be wondering, especially in the world of today, can I use artificial intelligence? And what might that look like in the terms of comprehensive exams? So now at the University of Waterloo, we actually have generative artificial intelligence guidelines for graduate students and your supervisors. So I'm actually going to put this into the chat right now. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a second so I can, okay, 1 second. So here was the first link that I talked about with the academic calendar. Apparently I just sent it to myself. And then I will plop in this is the link that's going to take you to those generative AI guidelines that I was just referencing. And I'll also, now that I'm right here, send you the link for accessibility services since we were talking about that earlier before I forget. And so this third link that you're going to see is for accessibility services. So I will go back to my sharing and we can continue on. All right, so you have those guidelines. Your supervisor should be made aware of them as well. I recommend checking them out because they will relate to everything that you're doing in your graduate career here at the University of Waterloo. So please be aware of them and check them out. Typically, because the tricky thing about AI use is that how it's used and other things surrounding it kind of differs a little bit in each field. And so the biggest thing that I want you to take away in terms of the AI conversation that we were having right now is go have a conversation with your supervisor and potentially your committee on how and if you're allowed to use AI in this process. And not only having that conversation in general about AI in general, because AI can mean very different things, right? AI can mean, yes, you can use Grammarly, or AI can mean, things like ChatGPT. So go have a conversation about very specifically how and if you are allowed to use generative AI in your comprehensive exam process. So have those specific conversations early so you know what to expect and know what you are able to do and what you can't do. So in terms of the exam, before we go into taking the exam and those kind of information pieces, I want to note it is important to take care of yourself. It's important to take care of yourself before you do the comprehensive exam, during the comprehensive exam, after the comprehensive exam, really just all around all the time. And so some general tips and guidelines are things like going by the 3 sets of 8 rule. So making sure you get 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of doing things that you love and recreation and things like that, and 8 hours of work. So if you are grinding so hard that you are working like 20 hours a day on your comprehensive exam, that's not going to be a good thing. You're going to burn yourself out. You're going to drain out your cognitive abilities. It's not going to be ideal. Not only just for your productivity, but for your wellness. I just don't recommend doing it. So make sure you're still getting your proper rest in order to retain and pump out the information that's being put into your head. And make sure you still, get to do other things in your life and the recreation pieces and seeing people that you love and doing things that you like. And I want you to practice self-care regularly, check in on your mental and physical health, maintain your balanced routines, including taking breaks and relaxation, get outside, get some fresh air. And reach out to wellness services on campus, such as counseling services or health services or Empower Me, which is off campus but involved at the university if you need assistance. So the picture that I have on here, which is very timely given how close we are to Halloween, is me with my husband, and I was in the middle of one of my comprehensive exam weeks, and I carved out time to go to Fear Farm, which is like, full of haunted houses, just a fun thing for us to do as part of one of my breaks, and the 8 hours of recreation that I mentioned earlier to have fun. So I was just taking a break from my comms. So remember, do your work and, do it like as efficient as possible and retain that information, but also take breaks and keep care of your wellness. All right, so we have moved on to the taking the exam portion of today's chat. So what to do before the exam? So schedule a significant period of time before your exam to review your notes, brainstorm what you might be asked, and practice answers. So I did this before all of my defenses, and I had to do a lot of different defenses in my master's and my PhD. I feel like in sociology we had like more defenses than some other programs for some reason. Like I had to prep and defend my master's proposal and the thesis, and I had to prep and defend the 2 comprehensive exams and the proposal and the dissertation. Lots of prepping for tests and defenses. And so this kind of piece of advice goes for comprehensive and qualifying exams, but also your defense processes. Every time I kind of brainstormed as many questions as possible of what I could be asked. And part of guiding what I came up with in these questions are things that my supervisor liked to focus on in conversations. So if your supervisor or supervisors or committee members, if they've brought up specific topics with you in the past, or if their research is aligned with a specific area or a specific area of questioning, start thinking about what questions they might ask you, because I feel like usually you'll see little hints and glimpses of this pop into your questions as well. And practice answering them. So take a look at all the questions that you might be asked and practice them. You could practice them on paper, even practice answering them orally if you are having a defense as part of your comprehensive or qualifying exam process. It's important to kind of practice actually talking and speaking your responses out loud. One thing I will say about this brainstorm is the funny thing about doing it is that I think every single time I did it, I came up with so many questions, like maybe 50, 100 questions, anything I could possibly think of that I might get asked. Um, and then maybe I'd get asked a total of about 0 of those questions, or maybe 1 or 2. And so most of the time there were questions that would come my way that were I was definitely able to answer them, and it was okay, but there were things that I didn't even think about. And so don't be too caught off guard if those questions come your way that you're like, oh, I didn't even think about this ahead of time. This process is still useful though, because it's going to help you kind of think about what kinds of questions might pop up, even if they're different, and how to respond to questions and think on the spot. So even if you don't ask a single question out of that list that you come up with, it's still useful to do that practice. You can even organize practice sessions or mock exams or mock defenses with your friends and your peers, maybe even your supervisor or advisor. And again, make sure you're getting enough food, enough water, and sleep prior to the exam to make sure that your cognitive performance is at the tippy top. So what can you do during your exam to get you through it? Tips for the written exam: manage your time effectively, which is important for any type of exam, but it will be especially important if you are in a scenario, for example, where you're doing that 6-hour sit down. Manage your time very effectively. Read the questions very carefully. You don't want to spend 45 minutes or an hour writing a response to a question and then going back and catching the question again and thinking, oh, this is actually not what it's asking, and having to redo it. So take some time, fully read the question a few times, and then start moving forward. You want to outline your answers. You know what I like to do on, any sort of written tests, whether it be an undergrad or my master's or my PhD. After you've read and really fully embraced the question and understood it, note down your initial thoughts, like how you might want to respond to it in bullet point before you actually go and writing in paragraphs. It will help you kind of do that structure and how your answer is going to look. Leave time near the end or throughout for editing and review, especially if you have a bit more time than the 6-hour allotment. And take some breaks as well, so you don't get too tunnel visioned into a response. So you want to step away for a little bit, take a break, get some water, fresh air, and go back to it, depending on what the allowances are for your exam. The oral exam, so if you're defending your comprehensive or qualifying exam, you want to center yourself before speaking, and listen carefully to the questions and ask for clarification. So all of these first 3, it is okay if someone asks you a question for your oral exam or defense, you're okay to think about it before responding. You don't have to just completely just start talking right off the bat. Take time, stew in it a little bit, give it a minute, think about it in your head and what the question is asking you, and how you might want to respond to that question, and what scholars or literature pieces might be related, and then start responding to your committee. It's not out of the norm to take a little bit of time to think about it before responding, so that's definitely okay. You can even take notes as they ask you the question. Right after they ask you the question, jot down a few notes on a pad of paper before you start responding. That's also a tip as well. Acknowledge gaps constructively, and maintain eye contact and professional body language as well. So these are all tips, especially if you're in person and you're chatting with your committee members, to keep all of these tips kind of in mind. So the odd time there may be some conflict or concerns or issues that pop up in the comprehensive exam process. And so I just wanted to share that there are ways to address these. So if you ever have an issue that arises with exam scheduling, committee communication, anything like that, perhaps conflict around the outcome of your exam, My first suggestion would be to address them directly first with your committee, your supervisor, or graduate officer in your department. If the issue is unresolved at that point, or if you are uncomfortable addressing the issue with the previous mentioned people, then you can contact the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies in your faculty. And lastly, you may also, if the issue comes to this, you may file a petition or a grievance under Policy 70 if you would like to request an exception from university rules due to extenuating circumstances, which would be a petition. Or you believe that your exam process was unfair and you were treated unfairly, or it was graded unfairly, then that would be grounds for submitting a grievance under Policy 70. And throughout this too, if you aren't sure where to go, you can always chat with us at Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs, or the Grad Student Association is also available for you as well. So I want you to remember that comprehensive and qualifying exams are designed to help you succeed in your academic professional career. They are preparing you. It is a new challenge, and comprehensive and qualifying exams are things that many of us have not, had to go through at previous points in our academic careers. So it is a new challenge, but one that you can build your skill set towards to become qualified to pass this milestone, and it will suit you for the better in the long term. Preparation, clear communication, and strategic planning will ensure that you approach this milestone with confidence. So some additional resources and support for you as you go throughout this process. Again, there is the Guide to Graduate Research and Supervision. You have the Graduate Academic Calendar, which is handy, that kind of outlines the requirements for a PhD and a comprehensive exam and a qualifying exam and things like that. The Graduate Student Association, it's a great resource on campus. They are your official representation as graduate students. They offer different workshops, advising sessions, so I highly recommend checking that out. Accessibility services, again, is a great resource to access as early as possible if you feel that you would need some accommodations for any graduate milestone. Campus wellness and counseling services are great if you would like some support with your mental or physical health. The Writing Communication Center, they have great writing and kind of time management tips in terms of doing your literature review. They also have a workshop on using AI in the literature review process, if that's something that your committee is going to allow. So drop in with them. They have drop-ins, they have workshops, they have online information, so highly recommend. The Student Success Office also has really great tips on things like time management, for example. And of course, you can always reach out to us at Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs as well. At gradexperience@uwaterloo.ca. So now is the time. I'm going to address all the questions as I possibly can. I see there's about 7 in the Q&A right now, so I'll go through those. And as I'm checking those out, I will also put it on this last page as I go to the questions, but I will stop sharing so I can link you to some of these things. So we will have our GRADnavigate session on accessing accessibility services on November 25th, if that's something of interest to you. And we have a GRADnavigate session on supervisory relationships and self-advocacy in December, which will also have pizza, so highly recommend that one. And also, we just launched our GradFlix competition for the year. So basically what this involves is you create a 1-minute video of your research, so it has to be under 60 seconds, and you can win up to $1,000. So highly recommend that as well. I'm going to pop some links into the chat for these 3 things, and then I will jump to your questions. So feel free now to pop in some additional questions as well while I'm getting these sorted here. All right, so link number 1 is going to our online information about comprehensive and qualifying exams in general. Link number 2 going in the chat is to our upcoming GradNavigate sessions. Link number 3 is for our GradFlix competition. All right, so let's get into these questions. We have some time. It's only 2:05. So the first question I'm seeing is the 7 terms of study timeline also the case for direct entry students? And so I imagine this might be a case where sometimes there are circumstances where sometimes students start a master's degree, for example, and then transition into a PhD. I would say go have a conversation with your graduate coordinator about that question in particular. But the 7 terms of study for PhD students that are starting, like they're officially starting their PhD, it'll be 7-term limit from there. But if you have some terms where you're kind of a master's student and then you kind of transition to the PhD, yeah, have a conversation with your department. Next question, can I get a link of the recording? Yep. So this was recorded, like I mentioned. I'm going to, when I send out a follow-up survey about this event, I will link you to the recording, and it will also live on our GSPA website on the GRADnavigate page that I posted in the chat as well. So I'll make sure it gets linked up there probably over the next few days. And so there was a question about the links in the chat from earlier. That was because I made a mistake and I accidentally just sent the first link just to hosts and panelists. And then I didn't notice. So now the links that are in the chat should be available to everyone. There's a question about what happens if an exam is unsuccessful. So like I mentioned, if you have to do the examination again, so let's say you go to take your comprehensive exam, and you have to you get the outcome of re-examination. Then you have to go do the exam again. At that point, if you are given an exam unsuccessful, you will be required to withdraw from your program. I would say this isn't a common occurrence, so I'll just say that, but that is what would typically happen. Will the Accessing Accessibility Services session also be recorded? Yes, it will be recorded, and I'm going to be putting it, I'll link it on the GRADnavigate page that I linked in the chat. That's where you'll be able to find the link for that one as well if you're unable to attend that session. I think I've answered all the ones in the chat. So I'll just give it another minute. If anyone else has any other questions that might be coming up, feel free to pop those in the Q&A function. So again, if you're unable to find that, it should be at the bottom of your screen, probably for most of you. It will say Q&A. If it's not right at the bottom of your screen, you might see an option that says more with like a circle with 3 dots, and it might be under that as well. All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions coming in, so hopefully I provided a lot of information for you. Oh, sorry, there is one more question. So the question is, do you know approximately what kinds of things the supervisory relationship session will cover? So we talk a lot about the communication piece a bit. We talk about tips and tricks for navigating conversations with your supervisor, especially ones that might be conversations that might be a bit more challenging and difficult to address. We talk about, how to advocate for yourself. We talk about resources related to that. We talk about different styles of supervision to get a sense of, what kind of supervisor your supervisor might be and how it might clash with your expectations or needs for a supervisor as well. All right, so I think that is it. But again, if any questions pop up, you can always feel free to contact us at gradexperience@uwaterloo.ca. And we check that email quite frequently, multiple times a day. So yes, feel free to reach us there. And if we don't specifically have the answers, we will most likely be able to figure out who will have the answers for you. And I hope to see some of you out at our next GRADnavigate session and some of our other upcoming events. And I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon.